Hare Krishna, everybody. So today we're going to do chapter 2 of the Bhagavad-Gita. You know, the Bhagavad-Gita, as I was explaining before, are the ABCs of spiritual life. You know, you read the Bhagavad-Gita, and particularly this chapter, chapter 2, the contents of the Gita summarized, and you get a gist of everything that it goes into detail, you know, later on. And it's the stuff you're going to hear repeated through different philosophies, Buddhist philosophies, different Hindu philosophies, different philosophies around the world. At one time, the Vedic civilization was a worldwide culture. It wasn't just centered in India. Let's start. And if you remember, Arjuna, right here, and Krishna, well, that's Krishna, and that's Arjuna. They were at the beginning of this battle, and Arjuna asked Krishna to ride in the middle of the battle to observe the armies on the battlefield. And when he saw all his relatives that were ready to fight, he kind of became overwhelmed and put down his bow and sat down and decided not to fight. Now Sanjaya is talking to the blind king, and he's going on, explaining. So we begin chapter 2. Sanjaya said, seeing Arjuna full of compassion, very sorrowful, his eyes brimming with tears, Madhusudana, Krishna, spoke the following words. Supreme Person, Bhagavan, said, my dear Arjuna, how have these impurities come upon you? They are not at all befitting a man who knows the progressive values of life. You do not lead to higher planets, but to infamy. O son of Pertha, do not yield to this degrading impotence. It does not become you. Give up such petty weakness of heart and arise, O chastiser of the enemy. Arjuna said, O killer of Madhu, how can I counterattack with arrows in battle men like Bhishma and Drona who are worthy of my worship? It is better to live in this world by begging than to live at the cost of the lives of great souls who are my teachers. Even though they are avaricious, they are nonetheless superiors. If they are killed, our spoils will be tainted with blood. Nor do we know which is better, conquering them or being conquered by them. The sons of Dhritarashtra, whom, if we killed, we should not care to live, are now standing before us on the battlefield. Now I am confused about my duty, and have lost all composure because of weakness. In this condition, I am asking you to tell me clearly what is best for me. Now I am your disciple, and a soul surrendered unto you. Please instruct me. So here's Arjuna gives up and surrenders to Krishna, who is God. That's what we all must do, right? Surrender. Surrender is key. Anyway, Arjuna continues. I can find no means to drive away this grief which is drying up my senses. I will not be able to destroy it, even if I win unrivaled kingdoms on earth with sovereignty like the demigods in heaven. Sanjaya said, having spoken thus, Arjuna, chastiser of enemies, told Krishna, Govinda, I shall not fight, and fell silent. O descendant of Bharat, at that time Krishna, smiling in the midst of both the armies, spoke the following words to the grief-stricken Arjuna.
Oh, look.
Yeah.
He's waiting.
Yeah. The blessed Lord said, while speaking learned words, you are mourning for what is not worthy of grief. Those who are wise lament neither for the living nor the dead. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. As the embodied soul continually passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. The self-realized soul is not bewildered by such a change. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perceptions, O son of Bharat, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. O best among men, the person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress and is steady in both is certainly eligible for liberation. Those who are seers of the truth have concluded that of the non-existent there is no endurance, and of the existent there is no cessation. The seers have concluded by studying the nature of both. Know that which pervades the entire body is indestructible. No one is able to destroy the imperishable soul. Only that material body of the indestructible, immeasurable, and eternal living entity is subject to destruction. Therefore fight, O descendant of Bharat. So here Krishna is telling him, fight, man. You gotta fight. I don't think you can give up. He continues, he who thinks that the living entity is the slayer, or that he is slain, does not understand. And one who is in knowledge knows that the self slays not, nor is slain. For the soul, there is never birth nor death, nor having once been, does he ever cease to be. He is unborn, eternal, ever existing, undying and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain. O Partha, how can a person who knows that the soul is indestructible, unborn, eternal, and immutable kill anyone or cause anyone to kill? As a person puts on new garments, giving up old ones, similarly the soul accepts new material bodies, giving up the old and useless ones. The soul can never be cut into pieces by any weapon, nor can be burned by fire, nor moistened by water, nor withered by the wind. This individual soul is unbreakable and insoluble, and can neither be burned nor dried. He is everlasting, all-pervading, unchangeable, immovable, and eternally the same. It is said that the soul is invisible, inconceivable, immutable, unchangeable. Knowing this, you should not grieve for the body. So basically Krishna is saying, what you tripping for, man? The body is just the body. The soul is what makes the body alive. And, it's one of the symptoms of a dead body. There's no soul. As soon as the soul leaves, the body's dead. It could look like exteriorly like nothing's wrong with it, but with no soul, body's dead. Can't function. So Krishna continues. If, however, you think that the soul is perpetually born and always dies, still you have no reason to lament, O mighty armed. So now he's saying, even if you believe in birth and death, you still don't have to cry about it. For one who has taken birth, death is certain, and one who is dead, birth is certain. Therefore, in the unavoidable discharge of your duty, you should not lament. Once you're bound to your duty, you're supposed to perform your duty, out of a sense of duty, not out of a sense of reward. So you must act. And this is what Krishna is telling Arjuna right now, that, in the unavoidable discharge of your duty, you should not lament. You got to just go for it. All created beings are unmanifest in their beginning, manifest in their interim state, and unmanifest again when they are annihilated. So what need is there for lamentation? Some look on the soul as amazing, some describe him as amazing, and some hear of him as amazing, while others, even after hearing about him, cannot understand him at all. O descendant of Bharat, he who dwells in the body is eternal and can never be slain. Therefore you need not grieve for any creature. Considering your specific duty as a Sastriya, you should know that there is no better engagement for you than fighting on religious principles, and so there is no need for hesitation. O Partha, happy are the Sastriyas to whom such fighting opportunities come unsought, opening for them the doors of the heavenly planets. Because they know if they can fight for religious principles without bullying their way through, even if they die, they go to the higher planets. If, however, you do not fight this religious war, then you will certainly incur sin for neglecting your duties and thus lose your reputation as a fighter. People will always speak of your infamy, and for one who has been honored, dishonor is worse than death. The great generals who have highly esteemed your name and fame will think that you have left the battlefield out of fear only, and thus they will consider you a coward. Your enemies will describe you in so many unkind words and scorn your ability. What could be more painful to you? O son of Kunti, either you will be killed on the battlefield and attain the heavenly planets, or you will conquer and enjoy the earthly kingdoms. Therefore get up and fight with determination. Do thou fight for the sake of fighting, without considering happiness or distress, loss or gain, victory or defeat, and by doing so, you shall never incur sin. Thus far I have declared to you the analytical knowledge of Sankhya philosophy. Now listen to the knowledge of yoga, whereby one works without fruitive results. O son of Partha, when you act by such intelligence, you can free yourself from the bondage of works. In this endeavor, there is no loss or diminution, and a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. Those who are on this path are resolute in purpose, and their aim is one. The beloved child of the Kurus, the intelligence of those who are irresolute is many-branched. Men of small knowledge are very much attached to the flowery words of the Vedas, which recommend various fruitive activities for elevation to heavenly planets, resilient good birth, power, and so forth. Being desirous of sense gratification and opulent life, they say there is nothing more than this. In the minds of those who are too attached to sense enjoyment and material opulence, and who are bewildered by such things, the resolute determination of devotional service to the Supreme Lord does not take place. The Vedas mainly deal with the subject of 3 modes of material nature. Rise above these modes, O Arjuna. Be transcendental to all of them. Be free from all dualities and from all anxieties for gain and safety, and be established in the self. All purposes that are served by the small pond can at once be served by the great reservoirs of water. Similarly, all the purposes of the Vedas can be served to one who knows the purpose behind them. You have a right to perform your prescribed duties, but you are not entitled to the fruits of action. Never consider yourself to be the cause of the results of your activities, and never be attached to not doing your duty. Be steadfast in yoga, O Arjuna. Perform your duty and abandon all attachment to success or failure. Such evenness of mind is called yoga. Yoga means to join. So when you have evenness of mind, you are joining your body and your spirit together, and you have one resolute purpose, to dovetail your actions, spiritual actions with your material duty. That is true yoga. O Dhyana Jana, rid yourself of all the fruitive activities by devotional service and surrender fully to that consciousness. Those who want to enjoy the fruits of their work are misers. A man engaged in devotional service rids himself of both good and bad actions even in this life. Therefore strive for yoga, O Arjuna, which is the art of all work. The wise, engaged in devotional service, take refuge in the Lord and free themselves from the cycle of birth and death by renouncing the fruits of action in the material world. In this way, they can attain that state beyond all miseries. When your intelligence has passed out of the dense forest of delusion, you shall become indifferent to all that has been heard and all that is to be heard. When your mind is no longer disturbed by the flowery language of the Vedas, when it remains fixed in the trance of self-realization, then you will have attained the divine consciousness. Arjuna said, "What are the symptoms of one whose consciousness is thus merged in transcendence? How does he speak? What is his language? How does he sit? And how does he walk?" You see, now here Arjuna, the devotee of Krishna, his disciple, is asking questions of his guru. And this is one of the things that's paramount in spiritual activities is you need to ask questions, and who's going to answer you. Now, the Bhagavad-Gita is the song of God. This is God directly telling you what you need to know. So, like Arjuna, we need to pay close attention to what he says. The blessed Lord said, "O Partha, when a man gives up all varieties of sense desire, which arise from mental concoction, and when his mind finds satisfaction in the self alone, then he is said to be in pure transcendental consciousness. One who is not disturbed in spite of the threefold miseries, who is not elated when there is happiness, and who is free from attachment, fear, and anger, is called a sage of steady mind. And he who is without attachment, who does not rejoice when he obtains good, nor lament when he obtains evil, is firmly fixed in perfect knowledge." Stoic. Stoic. One who is able to withdraw his senses from sense objects as the tortoise draws his limbs within the shell is to be understood as truly situated in knowledge. The embodied soul may be restricted from sense enjoyment, though the taste for sense objects remains. But ceasing such engagements by experiencing a higher taste, he is fixed in consciousness. The senses are so strong and impetuous, O Arjuna, that they forcibly carry away the mind, even of a man of discrimination who is endeavoring to control them. And that's deep, because Krishna is saying, even when you try, don't be surprised if you fail. Because it's hard, man. It's hard. You can try to control the mind, but how are you going to do it? You can only do it by following the instructions of the Guru. As Krishna says, one who restrains his senses and fixes his consciousness upon me is known as a man of steady intelligence. So we need to fix our mind on Krishna. We need to fix our mind on God. And then our intelligence can become steady, because if we don't do that, we just come up with our own mental concoctions, which always lead back to sense gratification. And that's why you see a lot of people who aren't really actually true followers of the spiritual philosophies they profess to be constantly fall down, constantly get caught and embroiled in scandals. They get caught up in money and sex and things like that. While contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them. And from such attachment, lust develops. And from lust, anger arises. From anger, delusion arises. And from delusion, bewilderment of memory. And when memory is bewildered, intelligence is lost. And when intelligence is lost, one falls down again into the material pool. One who can control his senses by practicing the regulated principles of freedom can attain the complete mercy of the Lord and thus become free from all the attachment and aversion. So, the more you worship the Lord, the more you follow these regulated principles, and you kind of lose sight of all the sense gratification that was once your life. Now, granted, you can't just give it up, and think that the mind is not going to dwell back there, because that is what's going to happen. So, you have to be steadfast in your devotional service, follow the regulative principles, and trust in the process. For one who is so situated in divine consciousness, the threefold miseries of material nature exist no longer. In such a happy state, one's intelligence becomes steady. One who is not in transcendental consciousness can have neither a controlled mind nor steady intelligence, without which there is no possibility of peace. How can there be any happiness without peace? As a boat on the waters is swept away by a strong wind, even one of the senses on which the mind focuses can carry away a man's intelligence. We have 5 senses, and even if we try to control them all but leave one to be loose, that one loose sense will carry us away. It's like trying to meditate and smelling the barbecue of the family next door. All of a sudden, you start to think of the barbecue, or that's just one example, but there's many such, hearing a certain thing, trying to meditate and listening to the birds chirping and, the wind blowing through the trees. But then you hear cars and traffic and and you start to get upset about that. Therefore, O mighty armed Arjuna, one whose senses are restrained from their objects is certainly of steady intelligence. What is night for all beings is the time of awakening for the self-controlled, and the time of awakening for all beings is night for the introspective sage. A person who is not disturbed by the incessant flow of desires that enter like rivers into the ocean, which is ever being filled but is always still, can alone achieve peace, and not the man who strives to satisfy such desires. A person who has given up all desires for sense gratification, who lives free from desires, who has given up all sense of proprietorship and is devoid of false ego, he alone can attain real peace. That is the way of the spiritual and godly life, after attaining which a man is not bewildered. Being so situated, even at the hour of death, one can enter into the kingdom of God. And that's chapter 2. That is the contents of Bhagavad-Gita summarized. Now, by chapter 3, he gets into the science of karma yoga. When you fixate too much on the results, sometimes you slack in the actual duty of trying to get that result. So, it's best to use our intelligence for single-pointed focus, God worship, and then through that, everything else comes. It says in the Bible, in the Christian Bible, seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and all else comes after. And it's time-tested and true advice, So seek ye first the kingdom of heaven. Seek the knowledge of the afterlife. And while you're one-pointed working on that, all the knowledge on how to survive in this material world will come. All right, thank you. Next is chapter 3. Hare Krishna.